Cliffe and Stuart Knechtle discuss with Green Alien why the Gospels are accurate on what Jesus did and said. Enjoy.
For me, I gotta ask, what makes you so certain that these Gospels are accurate tellings of what happened?
Great question. You are a thinker, and I appreciate it a lot. All right, you're right. How do we know that the Jesus we read about in the Gospels was a real historical person? Why do you trust the Gospels? Because I have tests that I use to determine historicity claimed by any book. And I would encourage you to come up with your own tests. Obviously, there's nothing magical about my tests. My tests are for internal consistency. Are there contradictions within the text between the different eyewitnesses that point to massive confusion? No, when you read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, there are differences, as we talked about earlier, but there's a tremendous internal consistency. Second test, literary style. What is the literary style of the document? Or what's the literary style of the Iliad and the Odyssey?
Epic poetry.
Bingo. Precisely. The Iliad and the Odyssey are not historical narrative. They are epic poetry. The Gospels are not epic poetry. They are historical narrative. That's important, the literary style. Thirdly, archaeology. Are we talking about the island of Atlantis out in the ocean that none of us can verify? No. We're talking about Bethlehem, Nazareth, Jerusalem, Rome.
Yeah.
Archaeologically verifiable places. And then fourthly, good gracious, what's the manuscript evidence that we really have what the eyewitnesses wrote? And the New Testament that we have today in English is based on over 5,800 Greek manuscripts or pieces of manuscript dated from the 2nd through the 10th century AD.
Yeah.
In fact, if we were to lose all of them, we wouldn't have a problem. Because the early church fathers between the 2nd and 4th century quote the New Testament 38,289 times. Every verse except 11 in the New Testament
very remarkably well
are quoted by these early church fathers. So we have such a plethora of evidence that we really have what Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John wrote. We don't have the original autographs. The original manuscripts are either destroyed or we'll find them someday. But the overwhelming evidence is it's historically reliable, the New Testament that we have in English. Does that make any sense?
What I'm trying to say is that these are biographies and are based on either eyewitness accounts or oral traditions. And there can be, even with eyewitness accounts we have in courts and stuff, details change. People may forget some things. So I'm not trying to say I know what Jesus didn't say or what he's like, or I don't like he said this or whatever.
But the range of details and the differences that we bring to a court of law based off of some type of, if we're both detectives to a crime scene, our testimonies will be different. And when historical scholars see differences in ancient manuscripts, they say, that probably happened. If they don't see differences, they say, collusion, that did not happen. And so eyewitness testimony is still taken as the #1 piece of evidence, even more so than DNA evidence today. And so even if we had DNA evidence from Jesus' body back then, that would not be stronger than eyewitness testimony.
All right, let me ask you a question. If I am right that Jesus Christ loves you and me and that he offers us eternal life, if I believe in him, I go to heaven. If you reject him, you go to hell. Now, I don't think that's a good reason for you to believe in Jesus. But I think it's a great reason for you to study the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, in order to figure out, is he reliable or not? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. No, I'm much more studying of the Gospels to do, especially after this conversation. You guys brought up a lot of great points.
It's only 140 pages. So don't worry, it's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, about 140 pages. You're a very thoughtful guy. You owe it to yourself as a thinking human being to read those Gospels and then to ascertain, does the evidence point to me being able to trust Jesus, or is the evidence points to me not being able to trust Jesus? That's what Jesus Christ wants with every single one of us. He says, here's the evidence that I'm reliable, I really do love you, and I really want to give you life with God today and eternal life in heaven. Now trust in me. Does that make sense?
That does make sense.
You've been a delight. You've made my day, let me tell you.
My day too. I've been waiting for this for so long.
Good to meet you.
Good to meet you too, man. Thank you. Thank you so much,
Good to see you,
man.
man.